Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of the in-depth training of dyslexia and dysgraphia. And today we are going straight to supporting dyslexic learners. We've known from the free class what dyslexia is and who dyslexic learners are. We'll still have a recap of that. But let's start first with how to support them. Now, when you want to support someone, the person must be aware that you want to support the person and why the support is coming. Now, number one way to support a dyslexic learner is to make the person aware of the fact that there is something called dyslexia. You tell the child, like we talked about the collaborators in our previous class, most importantly, tell the child. Let the child understand. You can give instances, like at the moment I'm taking two dyslexic students in secondary school. They have a kind of a category of dyslexia known as stealth dyslexia. We're going to treat that in subsequent classes. Now, let me give a brief story because using real life experiences really help whenever you are teaching. It's good to use real life experiences. So I'll be using myself as case study. Okay, the first time I had, the idea of what dyslexia is, anything about that was about 4 years back. I was having problems with the students, some students I take. I had a family friend that kept reaching me out and telling me, how do we help this girl? She's struggling. I don't know what is wrong with her. So many things were happening at that time. So I reached him and I spoke to him about it. And that was the first time I heard that tests and examinations do not really determine a child's intelligence. And I was just like, we've been teaching for years. Why would you say that? That is how they measure a child's intelligence. And he broke everything down for me. He didn't even realize he was doing a lot for me, but that thing sunk deep into me. And I decided to start making my discoveries about a lot. I started doing a lot of research on this. So I had this learner, and I had this learner that was always struggling. You could tell that this child is intelligent, but it did not always reflect in the school report sheet. And I'll be like, man, we did this, and I knew how much I was struggling to make sure it was, reflecting. You are too slow. You are very slow with writing. Why are you slow? You don't start your sentences with capital letters. I've always told you severally, start your sentences with capital letters. Why did you omit your full stop? This is comma. I have told you. I have done this. It was very frustrating. And I knew that this child was intelligent and is intelligent. But why is it not reflecting? Then and this is it. I give parents the progress report. I was a private tutor then, private lesson, private tutor. And when parents are paying extra, I'm still a private tutor, by the way. And when parents are paying extra, they want to see work being done. So I'm always giving parents report based on what is being done. I'm always very plain about it. So I keep telling the parent, your child is not writing notes, your child is not doing this, your child is not doing that. And parents who are getting, feedbacks from school, they're giving same reports. And I was just like, how could I help the child? I'm the one that was called to intervene in this child's life. How can I help? Then there was a day I was really, pushed to the wall. You are intelligent, it's not reflecting. Your parents are paying. It's not the money is, but we're not seeing result. I was really frustrated. Then I reached my friend. I started making my findings. Thereafter, on that day, I called the parents and I told them that this girl is not writing her notes. And we really need to we need progress. Without progress, we are headed nowhere. Where are we headed? So that day the parents took her. They had gone to the hospital to check her sight because she was not copying notes from the board correctly. They went to check. The ophthalmologist said her sight is perfect. So why is she not writing properly, correctly from the board? Why is she mixing up the letters and all that? They checked that there was nothing wrong with her. And when in school, when she was reported, she just said this point blank to the principal: I don't like writing notes. I don't like it. And everybody was, went AY, and they were just like, you don't like writing notes. So how do you think you're going to survive in school when you don't like writing notes? You don't like doing this. And that day, our dad really, dealt with her, and she cried so much, and I felt the pain, and I felt like I was responsible for her condition. Then that's when I decided to do double work. I started making my discoveries, research, and all this, asking questions. I kept bothering that same friend of mine, asking questions about special needs and the rest of it. And that was where I discovered that she was dyslexic. Now, how did intervention come in? Was I able to support? I called the mother and I told her, this is what is happening here. And I've discovered that she is not the only one who has that. It's just that others are coping with it. I see these signs in them. So I started educating the mother, keeping her abreast of it, trying to tell about it. So when you want to support people, they need to know this support is coming and why this support is coming. I also call the students, and when you are doing that, you must, explain beautifully, explain in details. I called the child and said, do you know you have Albert Einstein's kind of brain? And she looked at me and was just like, what are you talking about? I struggled in school. Albert Einstein. I read it about how am I related to Albert Einstein? And I started mentioning Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. You have that kind of brain. And we started looking at it, and she was interested. And I said, I can help you achieve success with that. You can do it. It's just that your brain is quite different. And people with different brains, they tend to do exploit. This is whom you are. You have to embrace it, and you have to allow me help you. And that is how the smooth work started. So when you want to support any dyslexic learner, you must what? You must create the awareness that this is what you are. Make them embrace it. Let them see that their difference does not mean that they are they are less privileged. That their difference is what the world needs. That if there is anything else the world needs right now, is people that think differently. So that is number one way of supporting the dyslexic. Tell them this is how you are wired. Your brain is wired like this. It is not a deficiency. In fact, it is an extra advantage. Then you can now give the child the necessary support. This is number one way of helping a dyslexic. Let's look at the forms of dyslexia. There are two forms of dyslexia. You have the dyseidetic dyslexia that affects the sight, or what they say it's visual. Then you have the dysphonetic dyslexia. Now the dyseidetic dyslexia, the first one, I remember talking about the student of mine who was copying notes wrongly from the board, and they had to go see the ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist told them that and the child's eyes are perfect. So everybody kept wondering, so why are you copying the wrong thing from the board when you can see properly? So that's visual. The child or the learner, the person copies words seen wrongly and wouldn't even notice. Now, it affects how a child sees a text when he or she is reading it. And let me give this instance. Now, let's say the teacher wrote on the board the date, Wednesday 25th, let's say March. Let's give that instance, Wednesday 25th March. And the child decides, Wednesday it's written Wednesday. That is how it's written. Then the child decides to put Wednesday or Wednesday. It's a honest what do you call it? It's a honest mistake. That's dyslexia coming out to play there. So that is what you call the dyslexic dyslexia. It affects the sight, the vision, how the person copies text. Then you have the dysphonetic dyslexia. Now this dysphonetic dyslexia is auditory, hearing. This is a situation whereby a child, you tell the child something, but what is being processed in the child's mind, what the brain is processing, is interpreting, is quite different. And when the child hears, the child puts something quite different down, puts it in another way, and you're like, what is this? What I said? Didn't you hear me right? So we need to understand that dyslexia is more than writing, is more than reading, it is more than sound. Some people actually think that when you learn your speech sounds, it's because they do not know their letter sounds. That is why they are making that mistake. It is more than that. It is language based. It is how the brain processes language. Okay, so that is, it affects a child's language. A child must be taught beyond letter sound, must be taught how to decode, segment words, and blend them. It goes beyond that. How a child speaks or talks sometimes is based on dyslexia. That is why when we're the first training, we talked about how to identify struggling learners. Some neurotypicals are struggling learners, so it's not every struggling learner that is neurodivergent. So you have to identify and make proper assessment. Sometimes a child might use the incorrect pronouns or verbs, tenses, because dyslexia is out to play. The child will not remember starting with capital letters, because I know that has been the issue I have with the dyslexics that I'm taking presently. I've told you, I've taught you severally, when you begin a word, you start with capital letter. When you're starting a sentence, you start with capital letters. You omitted your punctuation marks. All those things, it's dyslexia, because the brain, it affects how the brain processes information. Remember, they use one particular part of their brain to work, the right side of their brain to work, the right part of their brain to work more. So it takes a lot of time processing information and the rest of it. Now, dyslexia, it affects a child's comprehension. How a child is able to read a passage correctly, and sometimes the child will read it correctly but can't even answer the questions. So that's dyslexia coming to play, because the child needs more than just reading. It needs needs to comprehend. It is what you have already comprehended you'll be able to put down. So that is dyslexia. So I remember in the last class I said I introduced a type of an intervention approach known as the Telchian intervention approach. And I remember also saying that everything I've learned from various institutions is what I will put together and discuss about, so that we have an in-depth study about dyslexia, because dyslexia is very, very wide. It's very, very wide. Now, the Telchian intervention method. It is an intervention method that was invented by a Nigerian. After several online courses from the Western world, I also looked deep into Nigeria. What are we doing? Let's blend lots of approaches. No man is an island of knowledge. I'm open to learning everywhere. So that's why I decided to add it. That even we Nigerians, we are doing something about our struggling learners. We have educators that are really concerned. Now, This Felshan intervention method was invented, or yes, was invented by a Nigerian, Mrs. Igwe Thelma. And the Thel comes from the Hindu word, from it as an Hindu origin meaning oil, and while the Shian means very intelligent, is Indian, very intelligent. So she infused both together, Thelshan. And since oil is a lubricant that makes tough objects move freely and smooth, when we talk about frictional force, a force that opposes motion, she now made us realize that the friction in education, the Felshan method is a method that oils the friction in education that has to do with struggling learners. So the Felshan intervention method is the oil that makes a struggling learner very intelligent. It's an anointed oil, it's an extraordinary oil, an oil for exploit. That is how she defined it. It does not make the struggling learner just intelligent, but very intelligent. That has And she invented this approach after working with various types of struggling learners since 2004 till date, between the ages of 4 to 30 plus. So that is what the Felshan intervention method is, and it's really rich. And that's why I decided to infuse it. In subsequent classes, we'll be looking at we'll be looking at other methods of how to help struggling learners. Now she infused the dyslexic approach with the struggling learners approach. So this Felshan intervention method can work for both struggling learners and dyslexics. I know we are based on dyslexia, but also we could also learn wider. So let's go to the Felshan intervention approach, the types of dyslexia. We just looked at the forms of dyslexia. Now we'll look at the types of dyslexia under the Felshan intervention approach. Normally, many people know 4, but the Felshan intervention approach has 7. Discover 7 methods. So it's an added advantage to us to know better and do better. Let's look at the 7 types of dyslexia. We have the phonological dyslexia, we have the surface dyslexia, we have the visual dyslexia, we have the developmental dyslexia, we have the trauma or acquired dyslexia, we have the double deficit dyslexia, then we have the borderline dyslexia. I'm going to be fast about this, but I'll be brief. The phonological dyslexia is when a child has difficulty in making sounds properly. Probably the child does not have phonemic awareness, and a child cannot blend words easily and pronounce new words. That's phonological. Then you have the surface dyslexia. A child cannot recognize the old word, most especially when they are familiar. For instance, when a child calls a they, They, the, the child will omit the first part or omit the last part. So the child is only saying, a particular part of the word, is not saying, maybe the child is saying the first part, not saying the ending. The child is saying the end part, not saying the first part. So that is visual. Now, that is it. Now, the child will be able to identify some words, will be able to say and identify some words, but when it's time to read, he wouldn't be able to. Now, in this place, you see dyslexia. Now, you have the visual dyslexia. Now, this one also comes under a category of dyslexia called the stealth dyslexia, because this dyslexia in the Felshan, remember, it's the Felshan method I am introducing here. It is not a phonemic processing problem in this visual dyslexia. It is the dyslexia that takes a while to discover. It's hidden. That's what you call stealth. I'll go there. I don't want to go there yet because this is the Felshan. So it is not phonemic processing problem. Sometimes it appears the child can read and spell, but when it is time for dictation, the child will always fail if that will happen. Then, when you call such child to read same word, the child is able to read. But when it's time to dictate that word, you know, say, why are you making these silly mistakes? But you can read. It happens. You can read this thing. Okay, come and read it. So why have you written this when you know it? Why have you written it? And the child keeps looking at you like, what's this saying? Why did I write this? Oh, see what I wrote. Oh, that's um and you look and say, when you are this, when you are that, you make these silly mistakes. This is where the silly mistakes come in. When you call such child to read same word, the child has failed in dictation. The child will be able to read it. Now, visual dyslexia shows up when the child is about reading in the comprehension part. That is when the child reads the comprehension passage. I am taking students with still dyslexia. I know it so well. When you really tell the child to read the comprehension passage, the child reads it, you now say answer the question, this child starts choosing the wrong answers, and you're like, what are you doing here? That's where comprehension, the dyslexia is affecting the comprehensive part. And you're like, but you read it. Why can't you comprehend what is in it? So it starts reflecting later. I'll go there when we are talking about the categories under another method. Now, it is the only dyslexia that is discovered late. The child will say, the parent will say, oh, he didn't have difficulties reading. No, he didn't have difficulty. No. He spoke early. Yes, the child spoke early. No. I've never noticed it. It comes in later. Can we see why intervention is needed at the very beginning to treat all forms of dyslexia? Now we have the developmental dyslexia. The developmental dyslexia affects learners with developmental issues due to situations like autism, cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome. Now, sometimes we think people who are autistic that they are really slow, but the truth is that sometimes people that are autistic, they will just be very sound. They may not be verbal. They'll be very sound. They'll be able to read. They'll be able to write. But where autism now comes to play is in their behavior. Cognitive behavior. They don't know. They can't be by themselves. They will always need support. So sometimes dyslexia comes to play there, where in the developmental part. So dyslexia plus another added developmental issue. So that developmental issue is the one that brought dyslexia to play there. Then we have the trauma or acquired dyslexia. This affects learners that have suffered injury, maybe head injury, or it could be ear infection. Remember during the free class we talked about ear infection can affect the phonology. You must have heard, I don't know if any of us has heard about the ENT specialist. We hear that the ear, nose, and throat, they work hand in hand together. So that is acquired dyslexia. Or maybe the person underwent a brain surgery. And from reading books, I know of hemispherectomy, whereby a part of the brain is removed due to maybe seizures. So I've read that in books by neurosurgeons like Ben Carson. I've read such a thing. So it's possible for that dyslexia to be acquired. So that particular part of the brain that processes language, when the person undergoes an hemispherectomy, and let me do a little bit of science here, and the brain is divided aside from two parts, it's divided into four parts, then that place that processes language, maybe that's where is being affected, maybe by a tumor or a growth or anything, so they have to remove that part. So dyslexia, so it could be the part of the brain that processes language. So dyslexia comes to play there. That is where it becomes acquired. You have the double deficit dyslexia. This is the most common dyslexia. It's a combination of phonological and rapid naming difficulty. It is phonological means the child can't blend some sounds, or when you say some certain things, the child can't, comprehend. Then rapid naming, the child pauses when the child comes across some certain words before reading them. The child will pause. I'm not talking about those that stutter. The child will pause before the child will continue. And I'm not talking about new words. The child will pause, try to process it. It's processing the information. So that is what you call dyslexia coming to play there. Okay, and the borderline dyslexia, it's a dyslexia with where the learner has inability to pronounce new words or finding it difficult to spell new words, difficulty in differentiating and finding similarities in letters and words. That is the borderline dyslexia. That's the seventh dyslexia. All right, let's go to the methods of supporting a dyslexic using the Felshian intervention method. This Felshian intervention method also works for struggling learners. It's an infusion of, dyslexia and struggling learners. You know what we say, and when I say struggling learners, that is, you can use it to work with any learner that is struggling, that is not dyslexic, or you understand, or not neurodivergent. You can use it as a normal method, an intervention method. This approach, this Felshian approach. Now, the first one we'll be looking at is the no red pen marking techniques. I know of schools, I know of institutions that do not use the red ink anymore. They don't use the red pen anymore. They have the pens they use. They use what do you call it? They use green pens, they use markers. And why do they do this? Like I said, it works for dyslexics and struggling learners. Now let's look at it this way. Number one thing about struggling learners is that they lose their self-confidence. Then everybody's complaining, maybe at home, that is what you do, this is what you do, that is why you are struggling in school. Everybody is everywhere, attacking them. So dyslexics also lose their learning confidence, and one way of helping someone is by increasing, when you even go for therapy, they will tell you sometimes that you look into the mirror and you tell yourself beautiful things and you say, yes, I'm great, and that. So we can help by, the no red pen marking technique. It's not please, this is not something you must necessarily adopt, but it helps. These are people that have used it over the years. When you say 2004 till now, it's like almost 20 years. So it works. So from evidences from them and things I have also adopted, it works. Now let's use this instance. I know this is no longer common. Many schools these days don't use they don't use what do you call this thing? They don't use lesson notes. Teachers don't write lesson notes anymore. They use the e-note. It's convenient. It's the teacher can use it. Now imagine a teacher who is still writing lesson notes. And after writing lesson notes, how voluminous it is for many schools. Imagine a teacher taking 5 subjects, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 subjects, submitting the lesson notes. How you've invested so much. And maybe the school administrator, the VP academics, whoever it is that is marking it, then goes around, when it gives you your lesson notes and just sees, and you see in the lesson notes that he has marked with red pen a lot of things, a lot of errors. How would you feel? You'll be like, man, I use 5 days to write this lesson note to see the mistakes. What happens to the teacher's self-confidence? That is the same thing. Now let's turn the tables. That is what happens to the struggling learner. The person has struggled to write that, and what the person sees is marks. You mark the person down. And sometimes, although they don't do this anymore, in those days they would do it, they would write a big 0 Now these days, many schools don't write this zero. They will just write question mark or see me, or why didn't you do your assignment? So that red pen, it already has a mark. Some schools these days, many schools these days don't even impute red pen. They would just, what do you call it, they will just print out the results and they will just give the students that this is what you did, this is your mark. Now all those kind of things, the red pen, if you can adopt it, is just a suggestion. So number one thing, no red pen. You That will help the struggling learner, encourage the struggling learner that, oh, okay, I'm not seeing all these red pens all over. So it will build the child's confidence. Imagine yourself as a private tutor using that method. The child is happy to come home to see another pen. At least I'm not seeing this red, how very, red color, it's very conspicuous. Now we can adopt that. Then using the learner's learning style and temperamental traits. Remember when we're looking at the stages of the Thelshan intervention, we saw this and we said that using the Thelshan intervention, that it's very important we did this, and we must know the child's learning style and temperamental traits. And we know the learning styles. What are the learning styles? Do you have the kinesthetic or the tactile learning style? We have the visual learning style. We have the auditory learning style. So you must know the learning style. That is why these days they advise for when you are teaching, you use the multisensory, because you have different types of learners there. You have the dyslexic, some of them are dyscalculic, some of them are ADHD. So you have to use the multisensory. When you say multisensory, different sensory. Do you understand? You must use the visual, you must use the auditory. So when you're writing your lesson plan, you must make room for all these learning styles. Then, is the child highly distractible? Is the child's level of activity high or low? Is the child withdrawn? Is the child positive or negative? You must know the temperamental trait. Let me first emphasize on the learning style. What is learning style? Let's quickly know. Learning style is the most preferred, most effective method of absorbing new information and learning new skills. Now, various individuals have different learning styles, and some people can use all learning styles. There's 3 learning styles, or some people, one works more than the other. Maybe during science, the child may prefer the visual, or during English prefers auditory. During what do you call it? Mathematics likes the kinesthetic. The child, look at the child. Does the child like viewing images? Does the child like auditory? Does the child like touching? Now, for instance, you can't be teaching someone about computers now and it's abstract. For instance, the person must say, okay, what's the difference between backspace and the delete button? One is used to delete when you text are in front, and one is used to delete when text are behind. So all those things must come into place. Then the temperamental traits. Children possess, a temperament. When you talk about the temperaments, we have 4 major temperaments, but children, and your temperament is what you've been born with, what you live with, and what carries you all through, Then a child, what are their temperamental traits? Is the child highly distractible? Some people are hyper. It's their temperament. Hyperactive. Is the child highly distractible? Is the child's level of activity high or low? Is the child a withdrawn child that doesn't talk? Does not mean the child is not intelligent. Does the child have a positive or negative way of life? I have a student that he keeps saying, sometimes when he gets 9/10, he will say, but it's just 1 mark. That the child has a positive approach. Whenever he gets his mark, he consoles himself. Why some, they are sore losers. Just 1 mark, I would have had 100%. 1 mark. So try to identify that. It's very important. when dealing with dyslexics, know their learning so that you can put everything in place. And remember, this is Telshan intervention approach. It works for both dyslexics and struggling learners. Let's also go to the third one, the battery reaction seat arrangement. We have various type of learners. Remember, we said 1 in 5 students or 1 in 5 persons. Let's put it, because dyslexia is very common. 1 in 5 persons is dyslexic. So when you are having a sitting arrangement in class, you should practice the battery reaction seat arrangement. In this battery reaction seat arrangement, you put the struggling learners alongside the, what do you call it, the independent learners. Now, struggling learners, remember that the fact that somebody is a struggling learner, the person has a temperamental trait. And the fact that someone is an independent learner, the person also has a temperamental trait. Now, when you are pairing them, you put a struggling learner with an independent learner. This independent learner must not have, when you are putting a struggling learner, check out their temperament. So this independent learner must not have a highly adaptability level, else that can just pull the independent learner down, that can just adapt to anything, that can easily get affected. You have to put a low energy level individual with a high energy level individual, a child with a positive mindset with someone with a negative mindset, so that there will be a balance. There will be a balance. Now, so a child with a positive mindset must not sit with somebody who has a negative mindset, who is really very, that has a what, low adaptability level. So you must learn to study them and balance things up. Stressed out spelling. Now, since dyslexia is language based, whenever you are spelling or you're pronouncing, you're dictating to the child, you have to pronounce according to the sounds, not diction. Maybe you want to pronounce your dictating. You don't say things like market, examination. The child, if you're using diction and you're not using sounds, the child, you have to consider the dyslexics there. I'm not saying diction is wrong, but you're trying to help struggling learners here. This is not giving them expo. Remember, their brain does not process like the neurotypical. So you must make your classroom accommodate all types of learners, both the struggling, the neurodivergent, the neurotypical. So don't use diction. You spell it out. For instance, you want the child to spell out the word, WORD. Stress it out. Word. That is not expo. You are giving the child support. Word. 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 Stress it out for the child, because don't call it once, call it repeatedly. Most especially, let's imagine you're a one-on-one tutor. Continue repeatedly. It's going to be hard the first time. That is why we say let them start getting support as soon as possible. We know how in subsequent class how to give support to various children in various ages. Word, you pronounce it for the child. Let the child write out. You stress it out, so that as you're stressing it out, as you're giving, using all, when you're teaching multisensory, you're using your eyes, you're using your hands, you are demonstrating, so that the child, remember, dyslexia is different for each child. Some have mild dyslexia, some have, what do you call it, profound dyslexia, some have severe dyslexia. So as you are doing it, you are accommodating all learners. A neurotypical might be like, oh, I've got it. Why the neurodivergent? What they are seeing is, they're not seeing expo, they are seeing support. You stress it out and you call it repeatedly. You are giving that child a support. So stress out words according to, maybe you are using visuals, maybe you are playing games using it. Make sure you're using the learning styles, you are taking their temperaments along, and you are stressing it out for the child. So that is very important. The next one is mark the effort and conceptualization, not the expected answer. This child is trying. When the child makes effort, for instance, maybe you told a child to write pan, pan, and the child hears something else. Maybe the child is hearing pen, and you see the effort there. You mark the efforts, not the expected answer. And I said pen, you wrote pen. Can't you see I said effort? You're building the self. You're not just even building the child. You're not just teaching the child how to write or process information. You are building the child's self-confidence. Remember the movie we saw, Michael. What the teacher said, everything he did, he now started having behavioral conditions. A lot of things is going through the child's head. So let us put that in place. So you mark it. Remember, they are left brain deficient. So get to take longer time to process information, to interpret. They are trying to blend. They are undergoing phonemic awareness. They are segmenting on that particular side of the brain. Now let's imagine someone who has two kidneys. For instance, one kidney is the one working. That one kidney does extra work. So you give them time. You're building their learning confidence. Learning confidence in a struggling learner is very important. If you want to give the child the support, you must build the learning confidence. So that the child will see you as, the person who ignites his or her superpowers. Let's remember when I talked about Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein. They had to withdraw from school, and without the right support, would we have the incandescent light bulb? Will physics, relativity in physics, we owe it to these struggling learners. Steve Jobs, that invented the Apple Incorporation, that was one of the shareholders in Apple Incorporation. We owe all these things to them. So we have to build their self-confidence. We have to help them. So that is it. So it's very vital. So they're trying to put everything in a right place. They are doing so much processing together. So always mark effort. Nobody's saying mark everything correctly. So, oh, you did well. Wow, you got it. Then maybe half mark. I know you'll do better next time. When you do better, you get a full mark. That is it. You are helping the struggling learner. That is not giving expose. So scaffolding. Scaffolding is a temporal system, temporary modular system. We know what scaffolds are used in the construction sites. It is a framework used to support this learner. Let's see the learner as like a construction site, and all these scaffolds are needed for proper construction. Those include the accommodations. We'll be going deep into it in subsequent classes. The accommodation needed for the learner, everything must be put in place. Also, learn to glide spell more than sound spell. Glide. We talked about some certain dyslexics that they see the first part of the word, they do not see the end part of the word. For instance, they see they. Instead of seeing they say the. So it's very important to glide spell when you're glide spelling. For instance, you have cat. Some of them will not see it as cat. They will not identify it like that. So you can just say cat. You put the CA together. Cat. Instead of saying pat, you say pat. You understand that? So glide, spell instead of sound. Don't just limit it to the sound like k, at, cat, p, at, pat, b, at, bat. You can put it after doing that for k, at, cat. You put the ka, sk, a, cat, cat. So some of them will get it like that. So they will see the first. Since they just see it in two places, they'll see the first ka and they'll see the last t, cat, cat. So that is another. So let's go to the next. We have repetition till independent understanding. So keep changing. For instance, a child, you want to teach a child, you want to differentiate THEIR, THERE, THEYARE. They are. I give instances in the slide. You keep repeating until the child gets it. You understand? Teach everything brand new. Don't imagine, we did it last class. Bring the known to the unknown. Infuse it together. Don't imagine that we did it yesterday. You ought to have remembered. Their memory capacity. Sometimes when you are teaching, they're like, oh, that is why the multisensory, to enable them remember easily. The multisensory, some will get it through visual. They go to that part of their brain, they begin to search for it. Visual. So that's very important. Teach everything brand new. Also, homework should be a reminder, ignition, and memory retention, not a test of independence. I know we give homework and it's voluminous. That is why these struggling learners, they become negligent because they get scared. They are scared of textbooks. Books scare them. They do not like it. So homework should not be so voluminous, giving them 1 to 500. Go see you go. It's midterm break. 1 to 500. The struggling learners are not being considered. When they resume school, they are being told they are lazy. So normally, homework should not last more than 10 minutes for all age levels. It should not be voluminous. It should serve as a reminder what they've been taught. Reminder and not a test of independence. I want to try you. I'm not saying it's bad to try. When you want to try them on their strengths. Because at the end of the day, when you go into the real world, you go into the real world to express your strength, not to your weaknesses. So let them be tested on their strength, not on their weaknesses, where they will have, the wrong morale. They will be put down. Their self-esteem will be put low. These are one of the reasons many of these struggling learners, dyslexic, with how powerful they are, they have problem solving skills, they are critical thinkers. They drop out of school because school does not accommodate their type of learning. It's high time we accommodated them. And how do we accommodate them? It's by making learning, by being flexible with the way our manner of approach, the way we teach learning, with the way we teach. If we don't, we need to teach children in the way they can learn. We are also advised to use worksheets more than textbook. What are worksheets? I'll give instances in our main class. Examples of worksheets because they are scared of books. Struggling learners, immediately they see how voluminous the book is and they already know they struggle, or that will not motivate them. So using worksheets in the sense that some worksheets are, you can see worksheets, you can find examples of worksheets on Twinkle, on Pinterest, but I'll share slides of that in our main class, what worksheets look like. I'll share it with individuals, what it looks like. So use worksheets more than textbook. Also, a teacher must not be monotonous. The teacher must be instantaneous and innovative in all topics. In all topics, be instantaneous and innovative. You might be thinking, this thing is not easy, but I will teach you how I do it and it becomes easy. It must be instantaneous in all topics. Tailor it to suit the child. The learning should be learner-centered, not teacher-centered. The teacher must tailor the learning to suit every child. be the model of how a child should read. There's something I do with my dyslexic students, because now I don't teach conventionally. Now I'm more of into private tutoring. That makes me implement my work very well, because I have observed that many schools don't accommodate the way the unconventional way of teaching. So this is what I do for their comprehension passages. I do not give them to read it. I read for them. I call it a listening comprehension. They love it so much because it's like a game. I read it twice because they don't like reading. I read it twice for them. I read the questions and I go back to it. I take it upon myself when we want to do English comprehension. They love it. They even demand for it because it helps them. And before you know it, they will start picking interest in reading, become the model. If the child is not reading well, just I gave the book to him. Then you say, oh, bravo, you did well. I gave the book to him. Then before you know it, the child will want to, it's when learning is laced with love, the child will now want to copy the teacher. This is how my teacher said it. This is how you blend it. This is how you do it. This is segmentation. The child is able to decode. That is where the decoding comes in. So you can practice the pause, breathe, think, answer. You say, okay, calm down. I do that a lot. Calm down. You can get it. Okay, calm down. Think about it. Think about it. Now answer. Then you do it. You put it. Then make it easy and understandable. You understand? Let it be easy. I'm not saying word problems. Yes, when word problems, help them. You are giving them support this time. It's not expo. 3 men dig a pit. 3. Use it in class. Real life experiences. These are 3 men digging this pit as big as this class. Imagine 5 men. Don't put learning to be abstract. So you can use the pause, breathe, think, answer method. Use mental games. Easy and make it understandable. When it is understandable, the child is having fun, the child progresses, the child improves, the child wants to know more. Okay, still about being instantaneous and innovative, because dyslexia is very wide. The more you do it, the more ideas as a teacher, the more you use various approach, the more ideas will start coming to you. Okay, what if I do it this way? Don't base everything based on this training. Some things I started adopting myself. So as a teacher, you must be innovative. What do they call this? I've forgotten what. You must improvise. Yes, that's improvisation. You must improvise so that at the end of the day you become, a teacher's influence is a lifetime. So you must improvise. Not saying, but they didn't teach us this method when I went for the learning, for the training. You must be invested in it. That is why I keep saying this. Teaching is a profession for those who are called. It's not just a profession you can just venture into. And behavioral disorders must be dealt with before academics. Deal with the child's behavior, because there's something they say, attitude is everything. Some struggling learners, because of bad experiences, they don't want to learn. They say, you think you love me till you know me, before you know you love me. So a child or a learner with behavioral condition, you have to deal with that first, because the child will bring that attitude to work, to learning. So you deal with that first before learning can take place. You deal with that first. I remember seeing a video of a woman that said, because she was a struggling learner, I've said it before, that many struggling learners, they are always empathetic because they've gone through this, so they know how it feels. So when she started teaching, this child had a very bad behavior, and every time it was so unpleasant to her, and she'll go to him every time and say, I know you are a good boy, I know you can do it. And months went by and people were laughing at her like, you're just wasting your time on this boy. He can do what? And one day the child observed that the woman kept doing it, and he now came to her and said, how do you know I'm a good boy? And she told him a story, and the boy burst into tears. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of how do I put it? That was the beginning of the best and the rest of his life. So it's very important. So behavioral issues, behavioral disorders should be treated before anything else, before academics, so that learning can indeed take place. And the last on the list is take teaching out of the class. An exercise book. Take teaching out of the class, out of the notebook, out of the exercise book. I remember a woman once came to the school I was teaching then, and she was just like, this school, they are not teaching. My son, he has not been writing. I compared the notebooks with a school. If you see how few 60 leaves they've used it for a 10. And I was not like, writing notes, the fact that someone has a textbook, does that mean the child has already mastered what is in the textbook? No, it doesn't work that way. Learning is beyond how voluminous the textbook is, how many notes they write, how voluminous the English is. Is there a feedback mechanism? Can the child come back to defend what has been written? That's when you say learning has taken place. So take it out of the textbook. I've told parents severally, I take a child chemistry, and the child I'll say that if people were to judge us based on what we've done in chemistry, these few pages that we've done in chemistry, we did say we've learned something. And she was just coming maybe 48 days, and she had learned so much in chemistry, because I do not teach conventionally. You can bend the curriculum as long as learning takes place. Bend the curriculum, make learning fun, engage. You understand? Let it be engaging and interesting, short and precise. You are teaching about family, no need of writing, nuclear family. Make it short and precise, such that the child will always remember, the learner will remember. You understand? Use quotes, use your entire body, act it out. That is how learning takes place. Activity and fun filled. Active, productive, and fun filled. These are ways you can support dyslexic learners and struggling learners. The Thelshan intervention. The next class we'll be talking about various ages. We are now going various ages, how to support dyslexic learners of various ages. That will be the next thing. Thank you so much.